You are live.
Great. Welcome to the September 23rd meeting of the Governance Committee of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. At this time, I will conduct a roll call attendance to determine if a quorum is present. Please clearly respond present when your name is called. Courtney Nicolato, here. Jay Placencia,
Here.
Charles Fogarty,
Here.
Michael McNally,
Here.
Barbara Cotta,
Here.
Mayrai Ginty, here. Margot Cook, Mark Palanche. A quorum is physically present, and then we'll call the meeting to order. A reminder to all members that please clearly identify yourself whenever you make a motion or a second to the motion of minutes. First order of business is the acceptance of the agenda. May I have a motion that the Governance Committee of the URI Board of Trustees accept the agenda for the meeting of September 23rd, 2021?
So moved, Jay Placencia.
A second?
Charlie Fogarty, second.
Any discussion? Great, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion to accept the agenda for the meeting of September 23rd is hereby approved. The next item on the agenda is item number 2, the approval of the minutes of June 24th, 2021. Meeting of the committee, ratification of the agenda, and approval of the minutes of September 9th meeting of the committee as well. So may I have a motion that the Governance Committee of the URI Board of Trustees approve the minutes of June 24th meeting of the committee?
Charlie Fogarty, so moved.
Can I get a second?
Jay Placencia, second.
Any discussion on the motion? Great, hearing none. Voice vote, all in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is unanimous, and the minutes of June 24th, 2021 is approved. I also need a motion that the Governance Committee of the URI Board of Trustees ratify the agenda and approve the minutes of September 9th of the meeting of the committee. Thanks. A second?
Placencia, second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. The motion to ratify the agenda and approve the minutes of September 9th, 2021 meeting of the committee is now approved. The next item on the agenda is item number 3. We have discussion items. And so a couple of things, many of which there are no action necessary, but for us to begin discussion of these areas. First is to talk in review of succession planning of board members. And so we have spoken about this in the group, but it goes with reinforcing that much of the guiding legislation that we've received as part of building the URI Board of Trustees is to build the URI Board of Trustees, not necessarily to manage the URI Board of Trustees over time. And so some of that is in consultation and conversation with our General Assembly. Some of that will be in the development of policies and procedures as part of our work here on the Governance Committee. So there are a number of things that this group will be taking up in future meetings, but I wanted to give you a heads up on kind of what we're thinking about. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is kind of just a guide of where it's starting. One is around nominating Board of Trustee members. One of the things that we are working on and thinking about is putting together a form to which folks can go onto the Board of Trustees website and formally nominate a member that they would like to be considered. This committee will obviously be in consultation. The final decision is depending on the position through the governor, Speaker of the House, and Senate President. But we do want to create an inclusive opportunity for folks to nominate individuals to the Board of Trustees. And so that is in progress. And I know we'll be working with Michelle in between meetings to develop that form. And it is our hope and aspiration to have that form up and running sooner rather than later. So I will come back and talk a little bit about some of the things that I want to get ideas from the group as to what we would like to make sure that we capture as part of that nomination form. So I'll come back to that in a second. Also, we have 11 of our 17 members are up for re-election, reappointment, whatever we can call it, over the course between now and end of February 2022. And so we're working with our General Assembly. We're working through looking at the members. Margot is aware, obviously, our leadership is aware as well. And then the other thing that we'll need to be talking through is leadership of the board. And so Margot and Mike really take the lead with regards to appointments to committees and what that looks like. We also include every year in our board assessment and ask if folks are interested in leadership roles. We have some that have said, up to my eyeballs already, I cannot do any more. There are some members that are ex officio on the board or non-voting, and so that's different. But we did and have heard, and I'll share a little bit more in a second about the assessment that we just recently did, that there are a number of individuals who would like to be considered for leadership positions. And so that will be shared with Margot and Mike for their consideration as they're thinking about leadership roles within the board. That makes sense. Great. And so our November meeting, one of the things that we're going to have to finalize is the renewal list for Senate confirmations for membership. And so, as I mentioned before, 11 of that 17 we'll need to take through. We're also in the process of figuring out what that process will look like as this is our first time at the rodeo for the URI board. So, but I wanted to let you know that that will be coming and be part of our activities come November.
Courtney, I could ask a question on
Please
that.
do.
I know that there was legislation that was put in and didn't go anywhere in the last session about clearing up some of the vagaries, I guess, of the original enacting legislation in terms of specific terms and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Is the expectation that they'll be going forward with appointments through the process that we have in place now prior to any change in the legislation, or is there an intent to wait until that's been cleared up?
Yeah, given the fact, great question, Charlie. And yes, and I know that our government relations team has considered that a priority as we think about our renewals as well as our quorum requirements. I think are two priorities that I know our government relations team is looking into. And I've had personal conversations with a number of legislators that are more than happy to figure out what works best and what makes the most sense, because they do see us, based on the conversations I've had, as a very well functioning board. And so, yes, we need to figure that out. I think the timing is going to be the challenge there. You know, I think if there is a special session, it is going to be focused around American Rescue Plan Act funding, as well as any lingering stuff from the session before. And so we'll have to figure out from the government relations team what timing looks like on that. I haven't heard a specific time. But yes, we need to figure that out. Because there is a number of things that need to be cleared out.
So I guess is the expectation that we'll continue with the situation where people serve until their successor is appointed, waiting for the new law to come into place, or are we going to, or is there an intent to ask the appointing authorities to do it even prior to the new changes coming?
We're in discussions right
Okay.
now, so I don't think we have a clear answer yet.
Yeah, but per the bylaws, I mean.
Yes.
It does say that that will stay.
Right,
until the succession comes in.
Yes, yeah, and so that continues, of course. But timing to which this all goes down, I think, is what we need to figure out and narrow down. And I hope and pray we have answers come November, for sure. So want to talk a little bit, come back to an online form or an open process to submit names for nominations. You know, I've seen lots of organizations and kind of what they want to have included. Oftentimes it is your pretty standard stuff, why they think they would be a good candidate, you know, what type of experience that they've had, and then, you know, some biographical and demographical information. But wanted to see if there was anything that you all have seen in various nomination forms that would be something that we want to make sure we include as part of an online form. In particular, that has risen to the top. And again, just if we put the nugget, and we can always talk about it later, but want to see if there's anything off the cuff.
One thing I think is important is that there be some kind of preamble as to expectations, like that document that we signed, because they need to know this isn't some ceremonial badge of honor. This is a working group and you're expected to show up 5 times. It takes time and they should know that.
Yep, so, maybe a condensed version of that
Yeah,
expectation.
that would be great.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I love that.
An average or minimum amount of time. That's always a question. I mean, if you should think about the hours of, and how times committees meet, the board needs, and,
Sometimes the extra
and
activities.
for extracurricular, attendance of things, so that there's a general, people know what they're signing up
Yeah,
for.
that's great.
Yeah, before you say yes, understand that the average board member puts in this amount of time per
And
year in
it's
terms of
broken
days,
up in
hours.
general. Yes.
We shouldn't apply.
Time.
Yeah,
For those out of state, they need to know the meetings, they have to be.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point
If
too.
the board expectations document includes the number of meetings, give you the time. Doesn't say it's all day meeting, right?
Yeah.
So we've already
Yeah, that's a great point.
created something.
yeah.
I think I'd love to understand as well in a nomination form, what their activity is with URI today. So, and it may be nothing, and that still might be okay, given their expertise and what they bring to the table, but, how much do they know about URI? How active are they, with the university? Something that's on my mind.
Wait, a question on that. Have we developed a process of what's going to happen? You have the names come in. How are they going to be evaluated? And then again, I think the people that apply need to understand, depending on what the process is, that not all the, I doubt we're going to, send 500 names to the governor.
Correct. Yeah.
And people need to know this, the process is that you apply, there'll be a recommendation, but final decision is made by appointing authorities.
Correct. It won't be clear.
It's kind of like we're building a talent bank, I guess, in
Yep.
some way.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, yes, so we will want to be clear as to the, not our own. And that, but it is the governance committee that will look at those, and put together recommendations. We'll then present it, obviously, to Margot and Mike, and hopefully that Mike's already in the room. And then, the ideal scenario is that we would present a list of recommendations to the appointing authority, whether that is the governor, the speaker, the Senate president, depending on where the legislation goes. But we would like to have kind of a list of individuals, why we think they would be ideal for a candidate. But this would be this group. I think from a timeline perspective, given I think most of our renewals are around February, end of February, that this group in an ideal year would take a look at that come November. And then, we would put together our recommendations, because that's really where we want that all ready and packaged up before session starts.
So are we looking at this really for a year to have it in place? A year from now, we'll be starting to look at the first round of people to make those recommendations.
We may have an initial list sooner rather than later, but I think it's all dependent on the timing of the form for sure. But yeah,
We're obviously in the form.
well, we wanted to get thoughts today here, and then Michelle and I were going to connect after the meeting to start putting together the draft. Yep.
Do you want somebody to nominate someone else? Is that?
Oh, that's what I thought. I think it happens. Yeah.
I'm just saying it would be tough. You're asking for a commitment for a third party to.
They would have to.
Yeah, they would have to, they'd have to somehow agree. Barbara Cottom would be great.
Yeah.
It definitely.
Barbara.
Yeah, and then Barbara might go, yeah, no, I don't have the time, right? So, but I know that there's groups that do this, like I'll give Leadership Rhode Island as an example. Leadership Rhode Island, I've nominated people, the form is obviously smaller, and then the link is sent to them, and then they self-nominate. And so I don't know if we can get that fancy right away, but I definitely think we could think about it too, because, there might be, or, I'm hopeful that we'll also market this, say, to our community, to our alums via social media, about the board and about the nomination process. And so I'm hoping that folks will share it or say, hey, I think you'd be great for this, or whatever it might be. But maybe we'll start self-nomination first and then and then flick it up after that. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out.
Maybe have it some way where if somebody does nominate somebody else, they're not considered into the person. They have to say, yes, I am
Correct.
interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the leader, and I'll pull up, Michelle, I'll make sure you have the leadership Rhode Island model, because I think it's very comparable at least from a process and a flow perspective. Because then the person that has been nominated has to say, I commit to this time frame, right? And I commit to this work, and I make these. So I think it sounds very similar to what we're
So they
talking about.
have to fill out.
They do. Yeah,
That's all.
exactly.
Read the expectation.
Exactly. Yep. So we may have something to guide us through the process. So. Okay, good. All right. So we'll work on the form and the details, but this feedback's great. The ideal scenarios you all have something to look at and provide feedback on, but we would like to get this moving out.
I was just thinking, should we have a question within the form? Or something, just to,
Or is that an
Like
interview
us,
process?
yeah, that's the thing. What point do we try to? Someone have an issue, let's figure out.
Right.
Then get it back. There's an issue.
That's never fun. I know we follow the state ethics, but we'll want to know ahead of time if there are any conflicts. All right, let's think
Just a
about
question.
how and where that will fall, but I think it's a good call for sure. Okay, great, and the good news is we have this board expectations document to work off. So, good. And this topic does not, obviously as we're drafting it up, if there are anything else that comes to mind, please let us know. But I think this is a good start for sure. So thank you. Yeah.
They go through the same process, they nominate themselves.
No, so the folks that are already on the board, that will be us in November. We will talk about the renewal and extending the term. Then that will go and have to follow the same process that we all did, Senate. What we understand. Okay, yep. Correct. Yep, correct. Yeah. And so part of the next step is to figure out, if folks want to renew, if there are openings, if we feel that there are any board members who haven't met the obligations of the expectations, and that will come in with the pool. And then from there, we can figure out what will be the folks that we're recommending for renewal, and what will be the open positions that we're. And I think there'll be a process we would follow together, but they will be two separate. It flows after that. Well, thank you very much. So the other thing I wanted to touch on is we had the board assessment. We had, I believe it was 16 completed, and that included some of our non-voting members. So thank you everybody for taking the time to complete this. This is incredibly important to us as we think about not only what we feel as folks' effectiveness, but how they feel of their effectiveness on the board, where they see opportunities, how they think our processes are working on the board. And again, as I mentioned before, if there's any interest in leadership positions as we move and continue to grow our board. And so I wanted to share a couple of themes that came out of the assessment that we saw, and Michelle and I had an opportunity to read all 16 very thoroughly. And everybody was thorough. We may have to have a lesson in handwriting amongst the team, but that's okay. Some of them I'm like, I have no idea. Yeah, so there was a little forensic assessment done on some of the handwriting, but nonetheless, and we also determined we might want to make this an online form. Moving forward. Yeah, so, yeah, so that was certainly a learning for us, so we will work on that. But first kind of talks about expectations, and this was a Likert scale, kind of 1 to 5, what folks thought around things like supporting the educational mission, respecting governance boundaries, attendance of board meetings, etc. And there was really 4s and 5s for everything, which means folks felt that we were close, or if not extremely effective, and they were as well. The one thing that we saw that was a 3, and we received from 7 board members, was participating in philanthropy. And so I think that from what we've gathered and what we've read, there's a number of board members that want to help and do more as it relates to philanthropy. And so that will be something that we'll take up with Lil and talk about opportunities that might exist on that front. Also, the next question was around participation. As a member contributing to the board work through committees, the top real focus was the formation of the board. I think the group has a lot of pride that we built this, right? And the governance structure and what that looks like. And there was a lot of also pride around the president selection process and what we've accomplished on that front. Also, things like creation of the orientation manual, the various things that we've done, onboarding new members. Folks really enjoy, and this is interwoven throughout the document, really enjoy student and faculty perspective as much as possible. They said more of it. So that was great to hear. And then really just building relationships and trust amongst the board. I think you hear a lot of, I'd say, a lot of tone of we're done with virtual meetings. And it's unfortunately, we're still in the midst of this pandemic, but opportunities where we can continue to get to know each other, both personally and professionally, as well as in our volunteer capacity, is something that was interwoven throughout. A question around enhancing effectiveness. Folks really want to learn more about URI, its vision, its priorities. And I think they've been happy about where we've got so far, but feel like that there's more to go. So a lot of aspects there. I think lots of folks mentioned assisting with marketing and external outreach, as well as political outreach efforts. So loud and clear, the tone was, we want to help, we want to do more. And I know some of that has been deterred by the pandemic and the virtual environment that we've all been in, but there is definitely an eagerness to do more and support. Around board meetings, folks, this is everything, how they feel about they're getting information, are they feeling informed? Many folks feel like it's gotten better and better every time, more organized, more well-prepared and timely. Some would like the materials sooner. I think, what's our best practice on that, Michelle? Is it a week out?
So we try to make sure we have them within 2 weeks to you all as a final draft. Sometimes that would mean an enclosure may come to you a little bit closer to the meeting itself, depending on how good and ready it is. It would be in a draft, but not final draft. So what we like to do is, as a rule, get it to everybody within 2 weeks of final draft. So you'll see the draft day 1, day 2 email that will come to you all as a way in which to highlight what's happening. And then we'll give you the final email that will tell you, feel free to go into the portal, everything is ready for you to review. And actually, if I just make one quick comment in terms of being more prepared, it's been helpful for us to have the portal.
Yes.
Hopefully you all have the opportunity to review it. Before the portal, we were definitely doing a lot more of the email. And actually, the fact that we even have Lynn Owens as part of my team now, really for somebody who I just want to give a quick shout out to and help us to get to that next step as we go together. So thank you.
Okay. And Michelle, remind the group, because I know not all of us are aware, but with open meetings law, what is the requirement of getting materials?
So actually, we have to post agendas within 48 hours of the meeting itself as it takes place. So for example, for this meeting itself, we had to post that final agenda 2 days ago, which meant we had to do it by Tuesday, no later than 10:29 a.m. So that's why it's very important that we have a quick turnaround time. Liaisons are helpful to fill those agendas, but making sure that we indeed have it in final form. That when it is sent to the board itself, it's ready for review.
I love the portal. The only thing that I learned today is that you have to be on the URI secured site to get on the portal. URI open, you can't get on. So I can't be, you can't get on the portal.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue.
Sharing that, I
Let's-
was not
yeah.
aware either.
Definitely figure that out.
Definitely. Thank you.
Talk security.
But yes, we'll
Thank
definitely,
you.
we'll definitely figure out how to
Works great.
remediate that.
Works great.
And I'm wondering, like, I have no problem at home or at work, so it might be a URI firewall issue. Okay. Yeah, okay, so we'll look into that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That could be problematic tomorrow, because I haven't printed anything out.
Yeah.
Copies.
Okay, good.
Copies.
All right, good. The next was around performance of the board and how folks felt, what it can be done to improve. On average, the folks rated a 4 to 5, which is effective, very effective or effective. Folks were talking about they want to spend more time on big picture. I think that was an interwoven strategy, less time on the details and leave the details to the committee meetings. So if they want to continue to improve and enhance communications between board and administration, and more interaction and participation amongst board members. That's again a comment. Any suggestions around policies and practices to improve the governance of the board specifically? There was definitely folks, a lot of folks actually, that said we need to have clarity around terms, appointments, nomination process. So we just talked about that. We get it. We appreciate it. And folks really continue to reinforce our need to diversify our board, which is a commitment of this group and of our board overall. So that was great. And then there was what was the most stimulating activity versus the least stimulating activity that the board membership had? Enhancing the growth this most stimulating was enhancing the growth and reputation of URI, assisting and selecting the new president, interacting with students, meeting new trustees, rose to the top. Least stimulating, remote participation. The speed to which that we have to work around laws and OMA requirements, and then some parking and IT issues on campus, which we will work through. I mean, just even that. So, and then we talked about how folks want to participate. Really, we gave a couple of options like commencement, campus events, alumni events. A lot of our out-of-town folks said we would love to do what we can. There was even a suggestion of moving a board meeting to closer to commencement so that they could be here for both. That might be crazy on Michelle and the team, but that was a recommendation. Also, folks who say as much as their schedule allows, they want those opportunities to be able to support. I know I'm excited for commencement, be able to spend time with students and congratulate them for their hard work. And then there's any areas in which the board could enhance its institutional governance. If we really want to understand if folks were familiar with the bylaws. It's a captivating piece of work. And then if the board has been successful in focusing on strategic issues, and overall, yes, folks felt really very strongly. They continue to feel that board should provide oversight to URI, more support to the president. They want to learn about more areas of interest for the students, employees, faculty, and they want to spend more time, as we talked about, on and then characterizing the performance of the board in terms and comparison to other nonprofits that they've served on. Again, mostly 4s and 5s. And a lot of what we've heard today. I think one of the things that they've been most proud of is what we've done under the constraints we've had and the obstacles we've faced. And then there was a number of folks that said, happy to serve in board leadership. And there was a number of folks that say, I'm doing what I can, and I'm more than happy to be doing what I can. So, but overall, really great. Really appreciative for everybody and what they've done to complete the assessment. We will put it into a more tangible format, make that available to everybody, but wanted to share some early returns. I will tell you, I think Michelle and I got the last one maybe late last week or beginning of this week, so that's the reason why it isn't in a formal document for you. Any questions on the assessment? Any feedback that you've heard?
Yeah, I think it was a good process, and I assume we're gonna do this on a regular basis. You know, obviously as circumstances change, but I think it'll also give us as a board a chance to see how things change over time. Impressions, priorities, and so forth. So thank you for the job that you and Michelle did. I was one of those late ones getting with the bad.
I wasn't calling anybody out,
With the
Charlie.
bad handwriting as well.
I will say you weren't the worst handwriting. I'm not gonna name names.
I think I was.
You know, I'm thinking about the numbers are 65,
Yes.
and I'm looking here, and I think we are at the this year. So if you look at 13 of 17,
Yep.
this is a key of board participation.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
great on that.
And I will be, and it's not too late for folks. And so tomorrow at the board meeting, when we do governance report, it's not too late. And in fact, I'm wondering if Lynn, we can personally hand those individuals sheets. I mean, but just leave them right, right
Oh,
out there.
call them up in the middle of the room.
We actually did that.
last time.
Yes.
Put that flag in front of their place.
Don't need to go that far, but
We read them and then tell them, here's your.
yeah, here you go. And we can do that again tomorrow as well. So, all right.
Electronic form.
Yeah. Moving forward.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that will make a big difference for sure. Okay, great. Good. Any other questions on the board assessment? All right. The next is around board composition and matrix. So everybody knows a little less than a year ago, we all completed another survey around board composition. So this is really to understand the breakdown of our group by age, alumni status, area of expertise, gender, race, ethnicity, veteran status, and disability status. And so it continues. Obviously, we identified and we reported out at the January meeting that there are opportunities. One at the very top of that list was diversifying our board. But we do have a really great, I think, range of age, of experience, of geographic location, alumni versus non-alum. And so, but really the glaring gap was diversifying our board. And so having an inclusive process where we can open up nominations, there's a number of ways that I think as a governance committee, we can be leaning in towards that. We would like to do this matrix again, probably after the November meeting and then report out at the January meeting, so that we annually we're assessing. I don't think magical things change on your age or your race and ethnicity, but we do want to make it a good cadence of that. And, hopefully you all found it was an electronic survey, and we did have really good, I think we were 100% nearly, or maybe -1, but we were pretty close to everyone completing it. But wanted to see if there was any questions or any additional fields that we should be collecting on this particular survey. So let me run you through what we have. We have age, name, residency, alumni status, area of expertise, gender, race, ethnicity, whether you are a protected veteran or not, and your disability status, if any. Any other demographic or geographic data that we should be considering? Correct. There's a breakdown. Yeah, there was like 7 or 8 different areas.
Check more than one.
Yeah. Business, construction, education. But just to get an idea of
where their natural interest lies within their expertise. They somehow about else that would be helpful. But they don't do.
Oh, you mean like other,
Yeah, like when I say
Other-
expertise, it's like do, but maybe perhaps have affiliation, personal affiliation, or they volunteer somewhere, or where their interest is.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, is that in addition to the assessment process? Like, are they in the committees that they like? Do they want to consider something else? You know, maybe keep this very demographic focused. Maybe that's what, at least what that's telling me, but I think it's valuable. I just,
The purpose of this.
correct. Yeah.
A lot of times in a public company, you'll see a chart and it'll have the board members and you'll have attributes and they'll put dots.
Correct.
It shows that you built a board that has all the necessary attributes to.
Yep.
Doesn't really say what they're interested. That might be a different survey.
yeah, but that's actually very interesting, because I wonder if that's, we can use something like that instead,
Yeah.
or just, find.
Yeah, I can send
If
copies.
you have copies.
Yeah, yeah. I know that really our initial intent was to really ensure that we were being representative of the university, of the student body, of our faculty. And so, that's I know the intention. And I think last year, instead of that, I like that idea of visualization. I think we did more of like charts and graphs to explain. But I like the idea of doing that as well. So maybe we can put that as part of our report. Yeah. Yeah.
In the,
Attributes versus.
motherboard. And so you ask people to fill it out for themselves. And what you get is certainly interest, but abilities or qualifications or
Yeah.
specialties. So
Yeah.
you may be in finance, serving on the finance committee, but you have a background where you've done a lot of fundraising
Right.
or project management, or so that when the chair and vice chair need to put separate committees together or expertise for some reason or another, or outreach for lobbying, you can look down that column and see like tab.
Yeah, we
It's a
definitely
really good chart.
love that.
Does HEB have some requirements of a board as far as expertise?
I can research, I'm not sure.
Maybe we can look at some.
But
I'll
when
I'll
you're
have
looking for a
you.
new board member, it's really important because you say, I'm gonna lose these.
Yeah, yeah.
What
yeah,
what
yeah,
holes does
yeah.
that leave? And you're gonna recruit based on filling.
And I have a similar one at United Way that I can show you. This is exactly,
Yeah.
Jay's on my nomination committee, so she's seen it, but that I think could be helpful. But yeah, I love this idea. Okay.
I think we can.
They have, I've seen ones where you sort of, instead of this, sort of gauge yourself. So how strong are you in following? Sliding scale, so 3 or 4 or 5. That way, if you're sort of behind, it's your 4. But they wouldn't say I'm an expert.
Yeah.
I'm an expert, but enough sort of background.
Fundraising, government relations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Love
love
that
the sliding scale, you can sort of.
Especially if folks, because that will show you if folks have confidence or not in their abilities.
I've seen it that way too. Instead of a dot, you have a number. So it's 1 to 5, and somebody says in environmental stuff, I'm a 1, 5. It's filled out with numbers instead of, you see the strengths and support, not just a
For
dot.
everything, not just like the one thing.
Yeah, exactly. So they fill it out.
All right, so it sounds like next steps, Jay has agreed to leave, which is good, because I was gonna ask her anyway. Mike, you're gonna send some examples to Jay, great, and Jay will work with Michelle. And our goal is to get the next survey out after the November meeting, so that we report out in January.
What is we have the date?
November 4th and 5th, I believe. Yeah. of you actually be accept this, but. Probably. If URI or their, all of their. I like that too. Yeah, because I know folks didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. But I actually like that question for the,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because there's a number of things, and there's some things that folks didn't know, like I was already on the SEPs, the advisory board, already active in a number of different other facets, working with the leadership major here. And so that's the kind of stuff we want to know about. Great. Love that idea. Awesome. Any other thoughts, comments on board composition? Next item on the agenda is the Board of Trustees policy and procedure around honorary degrees. This is another policy that's in consideration around our role, the board's role. And I think it's important to know that there's a lot of folks involved in the honorary degree process. It is faculty, president, provost, there's nominations from the public. Shared governance is really important here. And but we do not have a process or policy within the board around this space. And so even though the majority of the process lies with the faculty, president, and provost's domain, they do come up here to us for review and approval. And this is true for both conferring of degrees as well as the rescinding of degrees when that situation comes up. And I will say that has only come up once at the University of Rhode Island. And so we've assessed what other institutions are doing. In fact, thank you, Michelle. She is the researcher that I am so grateful to have of what other institutions are doing to understand the board process and policy. And so we have insights from 6 schools, all of which, of course, are slightly different from each other. And so what I wanted to share just a little bit of what we've heard to date, and then we'll talk about next steps around the development of the policy. And so Georgetown, as an example, the president presents to the executive committee of the board of directors evidence for either revocation or conferring. The executive committee reviews that and then will forward to the board of directors. There are some that it goes straight to the board and does not go to the executive committee first. There are some that have no mention of revocation, just of conferring. And then like SUNY as an example, for the board, the authority to revoke anything actually sits with the boards. They're all different. And obviously we need to cater ours to the process that our faculty and staff and executive team already have. But it wasn't like to really understand the diversity across institutions and how they think about this. And so from here, I would like to have someone from the governance committee take the lead on developing our policy, looking more into this research. We've also talked to AGB to develop a draft of this policy that will come to this group for review and then the board to approval. So is anyone interested? I'm looking at you, Charlie, in potentially helping with this.
I will help.
Thank you, Charlie.
that's why we're all volunteering. Got it.
It's just good. But this will take having a conversation with our faculty senate and with Mark and the team to just to understand the process. I will say Charlie will probably become a guru as it relates to honorary degrees, so that we can make sure that the policy for us makes sense for us. But the research is unbelievably helpful. Michelle, you'll provide that to Charlie so that he has it. But it is our hope to have something drafted for this committee's review at the November.
Formal, or is it just a?
So here, the president, the president does, they receive the recommendation from the committee, the provost and the president have discussed, and then the president determines whether they take that to the board or not, is the process to which we follow.
And is it a list or is it just the specific number?
just the specific. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, we last year approved the 2021 commencement. We were together for a minute. And so, there were no issues, luckily, right? But we want to make sure we're planning if there is an issue, what that looks like, right? And that is for both conferring and revoking, because either one of those situations could come up.
Process, we have to keep in mind. We do.
Well, there's SUNYs and UMass, so, you know,
But they have some restrictions as far as open meetings go.
Yeah, it would go through, prior to this board, it went through the university process and then would go to the Board of Education. Presented by the president. And it was done confidentially, so it was not announced then that it can be kept confidential until an announcement is made.
Names were
And names
confidential,
were
but the
confidential.
review of honorary degree was that you were discussing, that was.
It was an agenda item, but it was executive session. It was
Okay.
not.
we approved our honorary degree last year.
Yeah, because it was already, I think they were already approved by
It was already
post-secondary.
approved.
It was
okay.
just,
It was just our check.
So just to be clear, the current process, we have the faculty and the provost come up with a list of names. They go to the president. President has the option of forwarding any or all of those names to the board, but the board formally has to.
Yes.
So it's a three-step process.
Yes.
It's actual committee. It's an honorary degree committee.
Well, there
Correct.
might be committees of this board.
No, what I mean is, and then the committee sends it up to the president. The president
Yeah.
selects who he
Yeah.
wants, and that comes for us for approval. That's how I think.
Yeah, it does. That's what, the process that we saw. And Michelle, you can.
So-
Right.
It's in the university manual of your honorary degree committee where we have representation from within the university faculty, staff, ARI, and I, for example, are on the honorary degree committee. The student representative, the your charter. Various representation. By that, you all just so you're aware of membership.
What is it, I guess, is it normally the process that everybody you recommend gets a degree? Or is it here's what we think and the president selects them?
So the way it works, so there's an honorary degree committee. A citizen, so someone that represents the public time. And we actually don't come up with the names, it's a nomination, like that form that you say. So any general public can take a nomination, review all those nominations. So the source of the names of the target is. So we review the nominations and we make a short list, but then the provost who chairs that committee takes to the president. And then the president decides on who's going to, who wants to award brings it forth to this.
And the nomination process is actually happening right now.
Yes.
For the 2022 commencements. So,
So it's really a four-step process: a nomination, a review with recommendations, selection by the president, approval by the.
so what we'll want to make sure our policy has is both conferring and revoking,
Yeah.
and what those processes look like from the board perspective. Obviously, there's lots of steps that happen before it hits us. Yes.
I'm happy to assist as the person with Kara who's sort of charged with the development of the policy and shepherding. I'm happy to assist.
That'd be great.
The development piece of it, not content.
Perfect. Dan, thank you so much. And Karen, thank you. Awesome. Great. So we'll move forward on that and, but wanted to make sure that it was covered and the planning started here. So thank you, Charlie, for being voluntold. All right, so next up is we have a number of policies. Just a reminder as to what our process looks like. We are the committee that reviews all Board of Trustees policies and recommends those policies for approval related to governance, obviously. Our process in normal circumstances is that we take up the policy for review and discussion at one meeting, and then we make edits or provide any feedback, and then we bring that policy back to this group for approval at the meeting following. So I just wanted to provide that context so that everybody had it. And so Dan is here. Dan is the assistant to the VP of Administration and Finance. He and Abby have worked through the details on many of these policies. I know Kara's been working on it as well. And so, Dan, I want to turn it over to you that you can walk through these policies.
I think technically policies fall in your lap. So on paper.
Good to know.
So Kara
Okay,
and
thank
I,
you.
work very much hand in hand on all these policies. So we're really, like, the reason we're here today is because we're charged with kind of getting these policies in shape. We are not necessarily the content experts on all the policies, but we ensure that they have gone through the right steps to get here. They've been vetted by the right people, and that they look right. They're ready to go. So we have these 5 policies here, and I think what Karen and I have split them up into the 3 conflict of interest policies, because they kind of come as a bucket, and then the trademark intellectual property policies, because they sort of go together. So we want to talk about those in 2 separate ways. You want to start with the conflict of interest, or should we do trademarks first?
I can start.
Thanks.
Okay, so as Dan said, 5 policies here fall into 2 kind of buckets, and we did address the policies and develop them in concert. The 3 that I want to discuss with you, and with your indulgence, because my glasses fog up.
Please do, go ahead.
So we have a policy on ethics and conflict of interest, a policy on conflict of interest in research, and a policy on public-private partnership in research and development. These are 3 policies that go together. They reference each other internally, so we will discuss them as a packet. The policy on ethics and conflict of interest is the policy of broad general applicability to the university, to all employees, faculty, and staff. And this is based on the state ethics code and the regulations of the Ethics Commission. So there's nothing really in this policy that isn't also to be found in the law. And so it was basically developed to identify that it is the university's policy to, have everyone be responsible for compliance with the ethics code. It identifies the Ethics Commission, and it identifies the need to disclose any conflicts that an employee might have to their supervisor. And so that's a broad general applicability. The next policy, the policy on conflict of interest in research, is, as the name suggests, is very specific to research activities. And this, again, is governed by federal regulations, and the requirements in this policy are all to comply with the federal government, the public health service that provides a lot of funding. And one thing I will just point out is that there is a disclosure process in this policy. And again, this just codifies the existing policy. This is a process that has been in place. We just basically moved it into the new format and through the new process for vetting and development.
Is that true of all these policies, that they exist in another form?
Of not all policies, like the ethics and conflict of interest, the broad policy, that is sort of new to the university. Again, it's based entirely on the ethics code, but we didn't have a written policy specifically to this and to this extent. There's a sort of an ethics policy on the HR website, but but this is now the official university policy, or will be. The policy on conflict of interest.
Like in the back of the policy, there's a table here, and this will show if it's a revision or a new policy. In other words, and if there's no policy that's preceding it, it means that there may have been something right in different places, but there's not a single policy that looks very much like this, that this policy is supplanting or adjusting.
No problem there. You said that those are policies associated with staff and faculty and folks who are actually involved. So, for example, on the research side, does that also, is that a board policy as well? I'm just trying to understand the governance piece.
Yes, these were deemed to all be needing approval by the board because of
because they're ethics issues and about ethical behavior. And so they fell within the understanding that we have of what would require board approval or what would benefit from board approval.
Does it apply to board members?
Yeah, that
So
too.
does the actual policy?
I can add-
Well, there is a statement on the Board of Trustees in the general policy on ethics and conflict of interest. And there are additional conflict of interest rules for members of the University Board of Trustees. But again, that's based on your governing statute in RIGS 2. And so that's just basically bringing in your statutory requirements into that policy. The
Yeah.
policy on conflict of interest in research is very specific to people who are engaged in research activities and does include a disclosure process. They have to fill out a form to disclose any interest they may have. And I make note of that because I was interested in your previous discussion about nominations to the board, and you raised the issue of potential conflicts. And this might be a process you might want to consider, that with their nomination form, they have to disclose any interest the same way people involved in research at the university have to disclose any interest. It's not necessarily a conflict, actually, but disclose any interest they may have that is, meets certain criteria.
Add one thing to it, your question, because I think you also are asking, why are these packaged as board policies? Is that also part of the question? Yeah, because as Kara said, it is important for the broad ethics policy to really be a board level policy. Then the public and private partnership policy needs board approval. Like by regulation, it has to have board approval. So therefore, to take the conflict of interest and research policy, we wanted to make them all a package, right? So that they weren't, these were board, these were administrative policies. We felt that since these policies really came three together and referenced each other, they should all flow.
Yeah. So
together.
that's great. And I guess the only reason why I asked the question also is because previous to, I was on the institutional risk compliance committee, and we reviewed all policies. I just wasn't sure that they were doing this and we're doing it. You know what I'm saying?
I know that Abby is the, been working through kind of figuring out just what.
Yeah.
So I know that that's been part of it. But yes, I know that there are some policies that they'll take up. Yeah. Abby has a whole schedule
Okay,
that,
trust Abby.
yep, that we will
All right.
follow, various policies and what time of year we will be bringing them in, approving them and renewing them.
Yeah, I would say governance usually has policies. They're addressing a particular risk.
I think
Well,
it
it's
can
coming.
come up as a compliance issue, that
I see.
sometimes
Right.
policies need to be created to comply with specific obligations. So, yes, but my understanding is this committee that has the primary responsibility for just general policies that need board approval to come here and then. So the policy on conflict of interest in research is more targeted. It's governed by federal laws and simply brings into the current format what was generally the process existing. In other words, there was nothing really specifically written down as this is our policy, but obviously there was, as part of their compliance activities in research and economic development, all of the processes, and so now it has all been codified in. And as Dan mentioned, the policy on public-private partnership in research and development, this is a required policy. The state of Rhode Island does have a Public-Private Partnership Act, and so this is to comply with that act. This also is a policy that needs to be approved by the State Ethics Commission. And so this one does have a prior written version because it had previously been approved by the Ethics Commission. This update made some minor changes for clarification, style, new format. And if the board approves it, it will then go back to the Ethics Commission for their final review. But to that end, though, all of the policies have been reviewed by the General Counsel, and Peter Harrington is Ted Myatt, who is research. The Faculty Senate Executive Committee has reviewed this packet of policies, and additionally, the Public-Private Partnership Policy
has been reviewed by the Rhode Island Ethics Commission, the executive director of that commission, and the Conflict of Interest Management Committee, which is a university committee that manages any conflicts that may arise from those disclosure statements that are required to be put in. A note on the public-private partnership in research and development. We have that act in Rhode Island, as many states do, in order to facilitate this specific kind of organizational, of way of doing some business, because just the very nature of public-private partnership is rife with conflict, like just by its very nature. And so this policy is to basically provide exemption from what might be considered, a basic conflict when you are a university researcher and you want to also create a private business to work in, partnerships. So this manages the potential conflicts from that duality. Individuals working for the university, but also engaging in a private.
Is there anything in these policies that they list individuals or organizations that have approved it? Is there anything that is new of magnitude or interest that we should pay attention to?
Yeah,
Really?
the only changes that have been made to the policies are, again, the formatting, clarity, style. There's nothing substantive that has been changed about the way the university has engaged with these issues in research and economics. In any of them. Again, the one of broad applicability is new, but it's also just, here's the ethics code, here's our expectations for you. I will note that we are creating a role of conflicts advisor for the university, and that I have a director of an enterprise compliance position under me that just filled. The new person starts on November 1st, and it will be part of that compliance director's position to act also as the university's advisor. So that if an individual employee has a question about, the policy, the ethics code, or any activity that they might want to engage in, it will be a point person within the university that they can consult to get some general advice on sure they are.
That exists. Since we have a new board of trustees, we need to take a number of policies, not just these, and change some of the language in the policies. Because of that, that gives us the opportunity then to say, let's review this, which often leads to some little changes here and there. For example, the conflict of interest in research, the procedures were removed because they will be a separate document. So, but in general, there are no major changes, but they will look different than what the previous policies.
On average, we have about 4 or 5 that would be coming in routinely, and so because the team is following that existing cadence process.
They'll drop off.
Yay.
Go like this and then drop off.
Great. And I know that there are certain timeframes, right, Dan, on the of bringing it back to the board. I don't know if some are annually, some are.
Yes, they are.
Depend, right?
I don't believe there has been a determination by the board on what they want to do as a standard. So we usually it's usually 1 or 2 years, depending upon the type of policy. And it can always be reviewed earlier.
Yep. Great. Any questions on these 5 policies?
We only discussed 3. I can discuss the trademark and
Please
IP.
do. Sorry.
I want to talk about intellectual property.
Yes, please do.
I'll make it relatively brief. These 2 policies sort of come together because they both deal with intellectual property. The IP policy was developed by the Division of Research and Economic Development and also the URI Foundation. And that policy really manages the control of IP at the university, but primarily the IP that is developed through research and development. So in fact, what it does is it calls out as an exception that this policy does not control the university operational IP, the logos and other marks that self-referencing marks for the university. That is controlled with the trademark policy. In the IP policy, it's really guided by three tenets that they show up in the beginning of the policy. They're to provide guidelines for all the parties involved in IP creation and commercialization. And it provides an efficient process relative to IP management, and it also works to recognize all the interests in IP. It really wants to cover the entire development process. To answer your question, wherever about changes, this is an update to a policy that was originally approved by the Board of Education in 2013, and the significant changes to this policy are as follows. Otherwise, the policy is generally similar in terms of its material aspects, not just some language has been shifted. But there are updates to the entity names, right? The Board of Trustees, the Economic Development Office, et cetera. There is some clarity included now regarding ownership determinations of student-developed IP. That was not in the original policy. There are updates related to compliance with the federally mandated provisions of the Doyle Act. So that's as that act changes, we've had to change things in the IP policy. They simplified the royalty distribution schedule, and actually it's in favor of the inventor. So that's been made simpler. We removed the procedural elements from the policy, and then we had this exception I mentioned before about the exclusion of the operational, because that was important that we're able to carve those out. So the trademarks, to people who had reviewed this policy, it was highly vetted. It had multiple passes through the OGC office. The Council of Deans has seen this policy. The Faculty Senate Executive Committee has reviewed this, and Faculty Research Advisory. It's been broadly vetted. The trademarks policy is a shorter and a simpler policy, and really and it's a new policy. This policy focuses on the operational or the self-referencing trademarks of the university. Two important points, though, for this group to know in this policy is that through the approval of this policy, the board will authorize the licensing committee. The licensing committee is a committee run by the Vice President for Affairs that manages the trademarks, royalty distribution, permissions, et cetera. But this policy, the board will approve the licensing committee to do all of the management for these trademarks. And the second thing is that through the approval of this policy, the board will delegate to the president alone, solely the authority to approve new marks and decide which marks to protect. Now, obviously, people bring in new marks and make decisions, but that authority would rest at the final decisions with the president. So that's important because the approval of the policy will sort of put those two things in place.
Any questions on the 5 policies that are being presented for feedback today?
And of course, if, before the next board meeting, if you please let us know. But it will come back to you again in November for the action item to recommend approval by the full board. So if anything, 2 weeks before that meeting. You learned.
Thank you, Karen.
We
Yeah,
can address that for the
great.
And if there are any changes to this policy, this draft, we'll bring it to you as a red line.
Perfect. Great. Dan, Kara, thank you so much. All right, we do have some action items. The URI Board of Trustees policy review and recommendation for the policy of non-discrimination. This was presented last meeting, or not last meeting, June's meeting. And so may I have a motion that the Governance Committee of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the policy on non-discrimination as recommended and presented?
Carly Kogan, so moved.
Any second? Great. Any discussion?
One minor point. So, they mentioned that it is a new policy, so it doesn't have that little revisions bottom of it.
This policy is sort of on its face new, meaning like as a kind of aggregate policy. It's new. It does point to the regulatory environment. That's kind of the goal of this policy, similar to ethics and conflict. So yes, it's new, but it doesn't. It's not that there were no non-discrimination
Right now, I'm just pointing out that it doesn't have the.
Oh, the
history
block.
provisions.
I will ensure that, I can ensure that that is added.
Because again, when it was presented at the June meeting, Abby described sort of the history. We've always operated under, prior to the Board of Trustees, we operated under policies. They had very, detailed policies on discrimination and harassment. But it combined, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct with all the discrimination into one policy. When the new Title IX regulations dropped, we were required to create a policy and set of procedures to apply with those. So that left us with a specific policy on sexual misconduct that the board approved. But then the existing council of post-secondary education policy that still covered everything. So this is the companion piece to bring forward from the council of post-secondary policy, the discrimination, all discrimination aside from the sexual misconduct into a university policy. So I don't think we've actually discussed in the history block whether the history would be only for university versions or whether it would, the history would point to like the council policies that, because substantively it does not change from what we had under the council. But we haven't discussed this in terms of the history block pointing to an external source.
Yeah, so ones I've seen to date have not had a historical reference to any of the councils. And it's looked exactly
correct.
like it does
Yeah.
now. Yeah, sorry, Barb.
I think initially, as we go through the first time, it should, because it's a frame of reference, where it's coming from, and that it's been vetted and operational for however long. You don't have to say how long, but that, it just gives you comfort that,
It's like starting from scratch.
right?
Yeah. Very good. Very good. We'll make sure we do that.
Yep.
Great. Any other further discussion? All right, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion is approved. The next item is around Board of Trustees remote participation. This was taken up in the special meeting that we had at the beginning of September. This ties to legislation that has been set forth related to how remote participation is set up specifically at the University of Rhode Island. Alyssa and Lauren at the September meeting shared the details, and the governance committee had a chance to review at that point in time. Lauren, anything else you want to share before we go to a vote?
No, nothing new, Courtney. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you. So may I have a motion that the governance committee of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the URI Board of Trustees. How many times can I say Board of Trustees? Remote meeting participation policy as recommended and presented.
So moved, Jacob Sensia.
Can I get a second?
I'm like, a second.
Any discussion on the motion? Please do.
So, physical.
Yes.
It doesn't say if that member can also. That's
All can vote. Yeah, it's just that it was
whether
surrounding
they're
the board.
remote or not.
Yes.
They're full participants.
Yeah. Yes, and so really, and Lauren, keep me honest, but really the focus of the remote participation policy is how we choose who participates, how we ensure that we have 13 physically present as it relates to the legislation and the law that denotes this. Anything else, Lauren, on that?
No, Courtney, thanks.
Okay, got it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
full.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's if they're there.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, like 13 out of 17 physically in person for a global board, and this is Courtney talking, not anybody else, is really hard. And so I'm hopeful that we have proven as a board that we are more than functional in both the virtual and in-person environment, but it is a big challenge for us. All right, any other discussion? Right. I will ask for a voice vote. All in favor? Say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved. The final item on today's agenda is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn
So moved, April 7th.
and a second?
Mark it down a second.
All right, I'll need a voice vote. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion to adjourn is approved. The next URI Board of Trustees Governance Committee is scheduled for November 4th, 2021. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.